Mr. Speaker.
Call Simon O'Connor.
Oh, very good of you. Look, I believe this may well be the last speech in this second reading of the Appropriation 2014-15 Supplementary Estimates Bill, and it's a pleasure to have followed after my colleague Alistair Scott in the penultimate speech there, as he says, moving in the right direction. And this budget was delivered in a very positive backdrop. An economy that is growing, and it's sustained growth over many years. We are seeing rising wages and real wage growth there, more jobs, low inflation and so forth, and particularly if I think of my own electorate, an importance of things like low interest rates, not only to the wider demography, but I think of some of the younger people in my electorate, even younger than myself, who are moving on to indeed, younger than myself. It's fantastic. It's more of a reflection on myself than them. The lower interest rates, incredibly important. But what I think illustrates for me where this budget lands is a small anecdote. The other day was actually the commemoration at the Auckland War Memorial for Bomber Command, and that in itself is quite a moving moment. But as I was leaving the museum, was going through what was known as the Minecraft exhibition. It's around the whole Gallipoli land, into a wonderful way for our young people to engage. And as you'll want to do as a constituent MP, you start talking to people. And there was a young family there, and they said, thank you for what the difference had been made in the whole benefit changes. The government has made a lot, rightly so, that the first time in 42 years, the real rates of benefits have changed. And talking to this young family on a benefit, the word was thanks. And you don't say that with any sort of sense of you need to be thanked. There's no sense of that. It was more that they felt that something had been achieved here, that the government, which they would not normally associate these changes with, had made a difference. And that little anecdote has stuck with me, that little conversation, that this government has rightly made the changes necessary in the benefit structure to help those most at need, because talk is cheap, as the adage goes, and we have much of it, and we've heard much of it from the other side tonight, but this government has acted, particularly in that social development side. Look, if I turn somewhat selfishly to my own electorate, the budget delivers to Tamaki. We often hear a lot about housing. Look, tremendous work is going on in Tamaki around housing. The taxpayers of New Zealand are funding effectively millions and millions of dollars into what is known as the Tamaki Redevelopment Project or company. New homes are popping up right throughout the electorate, and particularly in Glen Innes, and it is tremendous to see. The community understandably has been a bit reticent about the changes for a while, because they were being asked to move into changes they didn't understand. But now, as these new homes are being built, warm, dry homes, the right size for the families, be they small or large, real differences are being made. If you're going down Line Road now in Glen Innes, you see the most wonderful new music and art centre Te Oro. Again, a real fantastic facility that our young people in particular in Tamaki have been crying out to, and I want to thank the local board and others who were behind that. We hear a lot about transport, and we know that there's been further spending on transport by this government, and just one small expression of it for us in Tamaki is around public transport and funding. I think it's about $9 million is going to be spent for cycleways, connecting people of the electorate not only to the city but actually the communities together, so that those in Glen Innes will go through Meadowbank and Oraki and onto Tamaki Drive and the other way around. So some real substantial differences and changes there that this budget has brought and is bringing. We've also heard a lot tonight around the whole element of the surplus, and I think actually the analogy that my colleague Alistair Scott was giving around income and whether you're 100 below or 100 over is quite apt. What I think the opposition has probably found most difficult is that we quite rightly, honestly and transparently said earlier this year and through the budget that actually we can't quite make that surplus. We're in the right direction, we're working hard on it. I think some have used that oft-used scholastic analogy of Jonathan Swift around the angels on a pin, in this case how you could put a Boeing 747 on one. But we said, look, it's going to be jolly difficult. And of course, the opposition has delighted in that and trumpeted it. And of course, in the more recent weeks, and if not days, we've heard that it's actually possible that we might make surplus. Now, I want to be clear. I've used a conditional there. We might make surplus. I'm not going to trumpet that myself, but I think it's the trend that's important. That's right. The MP for Tamaki is making an announcement. I shouldn't. That's right. Thank you to the honourable member there, Megan Woods. No, slightly beyond my pay grade, but we're in the right direction. But I also think it shows the volatility in predictions. In fact, we only need to think of the election where the prediction said one thing and then we came home not just by a nose but by a head, to just put an analogy to my father who's possibly listening. And speaking of those who are listening, just to embarrass the Chief Whip, I just want to do a shout out to Miss Mbakando, fine constituent. Your son's doing a good job tonight. But look, what we're seeing is that a government in the right direction. Look, the last thing I want to talk to, and it'll be no surprise to the House, is around health. Tamaki, fine place, but no, I'm going to move to health, Mr Simpson. Well, I'm not quite sure how I could look like Robert Muldoon, but anyway, dearie me. Anyway, look, the health spend, $15.9 billion, the largest that it's ever been. Look, some of the highlights, $320 million more to DHBs. And in doing so, with the extra spend to DHBs, I want, as the chair of the Health Committee, to acknowledge what's been happening in Southland today. I want to acknowledge what I think is a good and rightly decision by the Minister. I know in the committee, particularly when we had the Southern DHB come before us and talk about the challenges that they face, that the board themselves understood the problems, and I understand today, of course, as they asked to step aside, that'll be a challenging decision, but I think the right one. Also, moving around in the electorate, down in Clutha Southland and the likes, the challenges are there. And so applaud that decision and the extra funding, the $320 million that's going to DHBs. I noted in a previous speech around the appropriation bill, $76 million for palliative care and hospice care. I think that's a really great initiative, one that people may not know so much about, partly because it's one of those topics you don't want to talk about, is the bowel cancer screening, another $12.4 million. I think some at $12.4 million around bowel screening, Mr Simpson. Let's hope that for some of us it remains a theory rather than an experience, but something that's relatively important actually, and the initial pilot in this screening has been seen to be very efficacious. And a pre-budget announcement, and as is the want in politics, it's often forgotten days afterwards, but just before the budget we announced $98 million, around more, $98 million, Mr Bishop. Look, I'm flattered by the encouragement of my colleagues tonight here. It's a team effort, and maybe that, Mr Speaker, that's probably the sign of what's different about this side to the other when it comes not only to this budget but the appropriations, that ultimately an appropriations about bringing things together, and this National Party, this government is a team. It brings things together confidently and strongly, unlike the other side, and I will end there.
Members, the question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. Party vote is called for. The clerk will conduct a party vote.
New Zealand National.
59 votes in favour.
New Zealand Labour.
32 votes opposed.
Green Party.
14 votes opposed.
New Zealand First.
12 votes opposed.
Māori Party.
2 votes in favour.
Act New Zealand.
1 vote in favour.
United Future.
1 vote in favour.
Members, the ayes are 63, the noes are 58. The motion is agreed to.
Appropriation 2014-15 Supplementary Estimates Bill, second reading. Breast Supply, first for 2015-16 Bill, second reading.
The bills are set down for third reading forthwith.